Tensions in the Middle East have reached levels unseen in a generation. The massive military deployment announced by United States Central Command signals that the region's security dynamics are at their most dangerous phase. In an official statement, CENTCOM Commander Admiral Brad Cooper called this operation the largest U.S. military deployment in the Middle East in decades. This statement is not mere rhetoric, but rather a reflection of the scale of the forces deployed. More than 50,000 military personnel are involved in this operation. This figure indicates that this is not a limited operation, but rather a coordinated military campaign of wide scope and high intensity. In addition to ground forces, approximately 200 fighter jets were deployed to support the strike mission, with air dominance being a key element of the strategy. 2 aircraft carriers also participated in the operation, their presence signaling readiness for long-range power projection and sustained strike capability. Since late February, thousands of targets in Iranian territory have reportedly been attacked, believed to include military installations and air defense systems. The claim that Iran's air defense system had been significantly weakened became a key claim in the narrative of this operation, meaning that the airspace for attacking forces was increasingly open. However, this conflict was not a one-way street. Iran launched retaliatory attacks against various targets deemed linked to U.S. and Israeli interests. These retaliatory attacks were not limited to Israeli territory. Several Gulf states were also affected by this escalation. Qatar was one of the regions mentioned in the report as being affected, as this country is known to host a U.S. military base. The United Arab Emirates was also caught in the escalation, as the presence of foreign military facilities in the country made it part of the conflict dynamics. Bahrain was not spared from the tensions. This small Gulf state holds a strategic position in the regional security architecture. The involvement of these various geographical points indicates that the conflict has spread beyond the 2 main countries. This is a conflict with enormous regional potential. Complicating the situation further is the fact that this military operation took place amid negotiations between Tehran and Washington, with diplomatic channels not yet fully closed. The contradiction between diplomacy and military operations illustrates a highly fragile situation. On the one hand, talks are taking place, on the other, attacks are taking place. For the United States, the deployment of large forces is a clear signal, demonstrating its readiness to defend its interests in the region. For Israel, this operation reflects concerns about the perceived strategic threat emanating from Iran, making national security a top priority. For Iran, however, the attack is seen as a violation of its sovereignty, and a retaliatory response represents a form of resistance to external pressure. The tensions are not simply a military conflict, they are a struggle for influence and dominance in the world's most strategic region. The Middle East holds significant geopolitical importance. Global energy routes and global economic stability depend heavily on it. Any major escalation has the potential to destabilize international energy markets, and uncertainty could trigger spikes in oil and gas prices. Beyond the economic impact, there are broader security risks. Open conflict could draw in other actors. The presence of an aircraft carrier and hundreds of fighter jets demonstrates readiness for a long-term conflict. This is not merely a symbolic operation. Deployment on such a scale also requires significant logistical support, meaning careful and structured planning. The claim of weakening Iran's air defense system is part of an information strategy. The perception of power is often as important as the power itself. In the modern era, war is not only fought on the battlefield, narratives and public opinion are also part of the struggle. The video message delivered to the public demonstrates the importance of strategic communication, as each side seeks to establish legitimacy for its actions. This conflict demonstrates the fine line between stability and chaos in the region. A single decision can tip the balance. The attacks, which spread across multiple regions, demonstrate the risk of miscalculation. A small error can trigger a larger escalation. The Gulf states are in a highly sensitive position, having to maintain a balance between domestic security and stability. For the international community, this situation raises serious concerns about the potential for a major conflict with global repercussions. When large military forces are deployed, the intended message is deterrence, the goal being to prevent the adversary from advancing further. However, deterrence doesn't always go according to plan. Sometimes it can even escalate confrontation. The fact that more than 2,000 targets are said to have been struck demonstrates the high intensity of this operation, and its scale reflects the broad nature of the campaign. The involvement of the United States and Israel in the joint operation demonstrates a solid strategic alliance, with military coordination being a crucial element. The alliance also sends a message to other parties in the region that there is a power bloc ready to act together. However, every military action carries consequences. The risk of civilian casualties and infrastructure damage always looms large over the conflict. Ongoing negotiations offer a glimmer of hope. Diplomacy remains the path to avoiding a wider war. However, as long as attacks and counterattacks continue, the risk of escalation remains high, and the situation can change rapidly. The world is now closely watching every development, as global stability depends on how this conflict is managed. At the heart of all these events is a major escalation between major powers that has the potential to destabilize the region and the world. With all parties at a crossroads between open war and a diplomatic solution. The choices made in the near future will determine the future direction of the Middle East, whether it leads to a new level of stability or enters a phase of broader and more prolonged conflict.